Welcome to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. Yeah, I'm your host, Brother Michael M. Hotep. It is Wednesday, March 31st, 2021, and we are live. Hope everybody's doing well today. It's been a very, very busy day today, and it's day 3 of the Derek Chauvin trial and the murder of George Floyd. We know today was another emotional day. One of the witnesses broke down on the witness stand. We also today we heard from the clerk, Christopher Martin, who interacted with George Floyd. So we're going to talk some about what took place today. We'll give you some of the highlights. And then we've been talking about what's going on in Georgia and other states, 42 other states. The Republicans are trying to push through voter restriction laws, and this is after the results of the 2020 presidential election. We've been talking about that here. We talked about Senate Bill 202 in Georgia and how the GOP is retaliating against African Americans and others that voted for Joe Biden, voted for Senator Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff in the Senate. We see Republicans across the country using the big lie that the 2020 presidential election was stolen and the lie of widespread voter fraud that they did not argue in their 61 lawsuits when they went to court. Widespread voter fraud was not argued in those lawsuits that they filed. That's what they said in press conferences. So we've been talking about Black Voters Matter, Latasha Brown, Cliff Albright. We've been talking about things, groups like the New Georgia Project, and growing calls for economic boycotts of Georgia-based companies like Coca-Cola, UPS, Aflac, etc. New York Times has a big story today. I saw it posted on Latasha Brown shared the tweet about this story. Black executives call on corporations to fight restrictive voting laws. Black executives call on corporations to fight restrictive voting laws. So there's a group of 72 African American executives led by Ken Chenault, former CEO of American Express, and Kenneth Frazier, the chief executive officer of Merck Pharmaceuticals, Merck. They've organized 72 African American executives who are calling on corporations to fight a wave of restrictive voting bills being advanced by Republicans in at least 43 states. We're going to talk about this. This is a big development. Then also we see that there's more corporations coming out in opposition to these restrictive voting bills. CNBC is reporting major U.S. companies take aim at Georgia's new voting restrictions. Then we see that Washington Post has an article here, Georgia sports teams and major companies such as Coca-Cola and Delta Airlines condemn new state voting law. We see Ed Bastian, CEO of Delta Airlines, has put out another statement because he got such backlash. For the first statement that he put out that it seemed approved of Senate Bill 202 that was signed into law on Thursday, March 25th by Governor Brian Kemp. He's put out another statement, a strong statement denouncing Senate Bill 202. So African Americans organized, other people organized who saw that it was wrong, putting pressure on corporate America. We leveraged our economics to push our political agenda and put an economic chokehold on corporate America. Now they're responding and they're speaking out in opposition to Senate Bill 202, but also other restrictive voting bills in other states, because this is coming to a state near you. We just, I talked about a couple of days ago how in Florida, They're trying to pass a similar bill. Florida Republicans considering new election bill that would effectively ban giving voters water. Okay, so this is you have these different types of bills in 43 states. So if it's not specifically your state, it's going to be one near you. It's coming to you soon. All right. So we'll talk about that on today's show. So on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Because right now it's corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man or woman's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his or her actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here on the African History Network show. We deal with current events in history and politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, Kemet, to 22828 to sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, Kemet, to 22828 to sign up for our email newsletter. Also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. If you like this type of information, you can support us. $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App. Then also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show, or at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right, so let's jump into this right before the break. When we look at what took place on day 3 of the Derek Chauvin trial, so we see that there was a new video that came out today that was shown today for the first time of George Floyd in the convenience store and interacting with the clerk, Christopher Martin. Okay. Now on the witness stand, Christopher Martin, a 19-year-old former store employee who sold the cigarettes to George Floyd, testified that he believed the $20 bill used was a fake, but that George Floyd did not realize it. He said George Floyd did not realize it. He also added that George Floyd looked like he was high. And when you watch the video, I saw the video today during the trial. And when you watch the video, you see that George Floyd stays in the store after he does the transaction to buy the cigarettes. So after he gives them the $20 bill. And if he knew the $20 bill was fake, do you think he would have stayed in the store after he gave them the bill? Usually, I don't have experience with fake money, but from what I've heard, when people pass fake money, they don't stick around in the store that they passed it to. They leave. So the clerk, Christopher Martin, also said, quote, I thought I would be doing him a favor, end quote. I thought I'd be doing him a favor by accepting the allegedly phony $20 bill. But Christopher Martin says under store policy, any counterfeit money received would be taken out of the paychecks of employees. So the $20 would come out of his paycheck. And he said that after George Floyd refused to come back into the store, his manager asked another worker to call the police. All this is over an alleged phony $20 bill. We'll deal with this on the other side of the break. Listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael M. Hotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. All right, stand by, everybody. Stand by. All right, stand by. We'll be back from break in 3 minutes. What's everybody doing today? Share this broadcasting on social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in also. All right, we'll be back from break in 3 minutes. Stand by. All right, let's see who we have here. All right, we got John, Sharon, TC. Stand by. We'll be back from break in just a minute here. All right, back from break in 1 minute. Stand by.
Station, Detroit's only African American talk radio.
Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Wednesday, March 31st, 2021, and we're live. Hope everybody's doing well. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number. If you have a question or comment, 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. Okay, so right before the break, we were doing a recap of what took place today in day 3 of the Derek Chauvin trial for the murder of George Floyd. Now, the store clerk testified today. And we're going to go to clip 1 in just a second here, Shakita. Store clerk testified today. His name is Christopher Martin. He was the clerk who interacted with George Floyd and accepted the $20 bill. He said, "I thought I'd be doing him a favor by accepting the allegedly phony $20 bill." Quote, "I thought I'd be doing him a favor." He said on the witness stand that on the stand, Christopher Martin, the former store employee who sold George Floyd the cigarettes, testified that he believed the $20 bill Floyd used was a fake, but that Floyd did not realize it. He also added that George Floyd looked like he was high. Now, he talked about store policy and that it was store policy that if an employee accepted a fake bill, that it would come out of the employee's paycheck. Okay. And we're going to go here to recap from NBC Nightly News. All right. So Christopher Martin said that after George Floyd refused to come back into the store, his manager asked another worker to call the police. Now, it was all part of a chain of events that led to their officer at the time, Officer Derek Chauvin, kneeling on George Floyd's neck for what the prosecution said was 9 minutes and 29 seconds. 9 minutes and 29 seconds. On the day of opening statements, Prosecutor Blackwell said that's going to be the most significant number coming out of this trial, 929. Now, as Christopher Martin watched police restrain George Floyd outside the store, he said he felt, quote, disbelief and guilt. Disbelief and guilt. He said, quote, if I would have just not taken the bill, this could have been avoided, he testified. I want to go to clip one. So this is from, this is a recap of what took place today. And this also talks about the surveillance video showing inside of the convenience store. Let's go to this clip, Shakita. Take it off of mute.
Up Food shows what George Floyd was doing minutes before Minneapolis officers arrived at the scene. He appears animated, dancing a bit before buying cigarettes from cashier Christopher Martin, who noticed something during a brief conversation.
It would appear that he was high.
Today, for the first time, we heard Martin's gripping account of when Floyd handed him a $20 bill.
When I saw the bill, I noticed that it had a blue pigment to it, kind of how a $100 bill has, and I found that odd, so I assumed that it was fake.
Martin then made what turned out to be a fateful decision.
The policy was that if you took a counterfeit bill, you would have to pay for it out of your money or your paycheck. I took it anyways, and I was planning to just put it on my tab until I second-guessed myself. And as you can see in the video, I kept examining it, and then I eventually told my manager.
Martin says his manager asked him to go talk to Floyd, who'd gotten in his SUV outside. Martin told jurors he went out twice with coworkers, but Floyd would not come back inside the store. That's when Martin says his manager told another employee to call police. After officers arrived, Martin says he noticed the commotion.
I saw people yelling and screaming. I saw Derek with his knee on George's neck on the ground.
In this video from outside the store, Martin's seen with his hands on his head, clearly anxious, the weight of the world seemingly on his shoulders.
What was going through your mind during that time period?
Disbelief. Thank you.
Why guilt?
If I would have just not taken the bill, this could have been avoided.
Now fired officer Derek Chauvin has pleaded not guilty to charges of second and third degree murder plus manslaughter. His defense team is arguing Floyd died from underlying health conditions and drugs in his system, rather than the 9 minutes and 29 seconds prosecutors say Chauvin had his knee on Floyd's neck. Today, Chauvin's attorney asked Martin why he turned away another person in Floyd's SUV who tried to use a counterfeit bill earlier in the day, but not Floyd.
I thought that George didn't really know that it was a fake bill.
So far, trauma has been a recurring theme as bystanders have testified. Today, jurors also heard from Charles McMillan, the man heard on video telling Floyd to calm down as Floyd struggled with officers.
I have had interaction with officers myself, and I understand once you get in the cup, you can't win. You're done.
But as the encounter escalated, McMillan told jurors he felt helpless.
I don't have a moment either. I understand him.
And today he sobbed. He watched the video in court.
Oh my God.
And late today, prosecutors for the first time played video from Derek Chauvin's body camera, which fell underneath a police squad car during the struggle. Lester?
Hey, Gabe, there was also some concern with a juror today. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, Lester. One juror told the judge that she was having a stress-related reaction and was having trouble sleeping.
Is that it? Okay. All right. So that's from NBC Nightly News, March 31st, 2021. Chauvin trial surveillance video shows inside convenience store. So a lot of new information came out today that we didn't know. We heard the testimony from Christopher Martin. We also heard the testimony from the other witness as well. So, I mean, these past 3 days have been pretty traumatic. You can, the witnesses, many of the witnesses express regret that they didn't do more, that they couldn't do more. Many of them cried as well. Now, prosecutors on Wednesday, March 31st, showed footage from Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin's body camera publicly for the first time, as the third day of testimony in Chauvin's murder trial brought more anguish from witnesses who said they wished they could have saved George Floyd. They wished they could have saved George Floyd. Now, they're showing more remorse than the man who had his knee on his neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, because Chauvin hasn't shown any remorse. I mean, just if you haven't been watching, haven't been following this, Chauvin hasn't shown any remorse. Okay. So the new body camera footage showed Chauvin briefly putting his black gloved hands around George Floyd's neck in May 25th, 2020, as he and another officer tried to force the man inside a vehicle. Quote, "We've got to control this guy because he's a sizable guy." Okay, he was 6'3". Okay, Chauvin, my understanding, is 5'9". I mean, he's 6. I mean, it ain't like he's King Kong, but maybe to Chauvin, this big black man did look like King Kong, but he's 6'3". I mean, come on. "We've got to control this guy because he's a sizable guy," Chauvin told an upset witness later. Earlier Wednesday, a teenage store clerk testified that this could have been avoided if he had not taken the counterfeit $20 bill. A neighborhood resident started sobbing while rewatching George Floyd's cries for his mother, telling the court, "I feel helpless. I understand him." This is Charles McMillan. Okay. 61-year-old man who is seen on the video telling George Floyd, "You can't win, get into the car," etc. Charles McMillan, the witness who started crying while video footage played, cried on the witness stand today. He had the white framed glasses. He said he had spoken with Derek Chauvin 5 days before George Floyd's killing. He said, quote, I told him, like I tell all, officer, at the end of the day, you go home to your family safe and let the next person go home to their family safe," Charles McMillan said. Now, there was a brief recess in the trial after a juror stood up and waved her hand in the middle of witness testimony, possibly signaling an illness. Okay, so read the rest of it. NBC News has good updates on this, live updates, NBCnews.com, also Washington Post and New York Times. Okay, because I go through and read all those as well. Okay, now I want to go to this next clip here, and then we're going to get to the 72 African-American executives who are calling out corporate America to denounce and put pressure on Republicans not to pass these voter restriction bills and to reverse these voter restriction bills in Georgia. The voter restriction bill that was signed into law in Georgia. I want to go to this next clip here. This is from the readout, Joanne Reed, March 31st, 2021. Jury shown body cam footage in day 3 of Chauvin trial. And one of the things they talk about here is the grief that has been expressed by witnesses, but the grief that many African Americans are feeling across the country. Let's go to clip 2, Shakita.
So accustomed, at least in this business, unfortunately, I have covered a lot of Black Lives Matter cases. There's a lot of grief. There's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of strain. The George Floyd case has allowed us to really see the strain of witnesses very much up close. So many people witnessed this man die or were near him just before he died that now we're sort of experiencing their trauma. Let me play a quick little montage of some of these witnesses who actually expressed guilt. And they played no part in his death. They expressed guilt regarding his death. Take a listen.
What was going through your mind during that time period?
Disbelief and guilt.
Okay. Why guilt?
If I would have just not taken the bill, this could have been avoided.
There was no medical assistance on scene, and I got there, and I could have given medical assistance. That's exactly what I should have done.
It's been night. I stayed up apologizing and apologizing to George Floyd for not doing more and not physically interacting and not saving his life.
Yeah, as an experienced public safety director yourself, is that something that you're familiar with, seeing that kind of trauma and sort of guilty feelings by people who witness a killing?
Well, I'm familiar with it on two counts here, Joy. One, being a 40-year veteran in policing, and certainly have seen these types of events, but nothing to what we witnessed today. We'll continue to witness. This is horrific. It's just absolutely a horrific event. It's embarrassing for the law enforcement profession. It is not reflective, certainly, of all the men and women who was out there. But what we saw from the beginning of their interaction with George Floyd was just wrong. And quite frankly, if you think about the fact that this may have been a counterfeit $20 bill, it really didn't have to go into an arrest. But the second piece here, as a former practicing clinical psychologist, we're seeing people who are tremendously traumatized each day in court, but not only on the streets of Minneapolis and their families, but across this country, people are traumatized, and people are really feeling really heartfelt about what they're seeing every day. This is horrible.
Indeed, and Shauna, this is sort of an experience I think everybody has experienced in all these Black Lives Matter cases. I mean, to your right, that could be our baby. You see, Trayvon Martin, that beautiful face. You think you relate because you relate to them. Isn't the challenge here that the one person who couldn't seem to relate to George Floyd's humanity, well, the four people, are these officers, right? I mean, meanwhile, a juror today halted the trial because the juror had a stress-related reaction. This is a white woman in her 50s, suffered what the judge called a stress-related reaction. She's been having trouble sleeping and had been awake since 2 a.m. And isn't that kind of the crux of the case, right? The four people who needed to see George's humanity didn't.
I definitely think that is a very significant, impactful point. And I think the prosecution is layering that in by having each one of these bystanders that had such a different experience, different training, different background. Still, each one of them had a visceral reaction to what was happening. They all came to one general body and consensus of thought that this is unacceptable. And that's significant. And that's not going to be lost on our jurors.
Yeah, and you can hear Mr. McMillan begging him, just cooperate, just cooperate. You can't win. You can hear it. It's so striking. Let's go through and talk about this fake bill piece of it, Mr. Alexander, because this is part of the crux of the prosecution case when he tried to pass a fake $20 bill. Michael Eric Dyson sent me a piece from his book, a book that he wrote earlier, which he talked about the fact that, there wasn't even a real strong belief that it was really a counterfeit 20. Here's Christopher Martin talking about whether or not he knew that the bill was fake.
The other person that had come in, it kind of seemed like he was trying to scheme, like he knew it was a fake bill. He was trying to get over it. I thought that George didn't really know that it was a fake bill, so I thought I'd be doing him a favor.
So, I mean, if that is the crux of the case, that he had committed this horrible crime trying to pass a fake bill, that's not even clear.
No, it's not clear. And here again, we're not certain whether it was really a fake bill. But let's say it was a real bill, just for the sake of conversation here, Joy. The reality of it is, it did not need to escalate to that point. It is a potentially phony $20 bill.
Yeah.
That's it. That could have been an arrest ticket at minimum. You give them an arrest ticket and send him on this way. But them to go through what they did to over possibly phony $20 bill should not have led up to what it led up to on May 25th of 2020.
Let me play some more Christopher Martin. He was very compelling in that he's so young and he lived above the cut food store. And he said he doesn't even live there anymore. I mean, people are saying they didn't want to go in the store anymore. That's how traumatized they were. Here's a little bit more of his testimony.
Can you describe for the jurors, tell me what his demeanor was like? What was his condition like?
So when I had asked him if he played baseball, he went on to respond to that, but it kind of took him a little long to get to what he was trying to say. So it would appear that he was high.
So you just had some signs that you thought he was under the influence of something?
Yes.
But were you able to carry on at least some conversation with him?
Yes.
Is this a portent of bad things to come, Shauna, that the defense is going to try to make George Floyd look like he was sort of out of his mind and high? But that's not what this young man said. He interacted with him.
I think that the defense overpromised a bit here. I think that when you see this video, what they described, the intensity with which the police department responded was going to give you a sense of something very different. And this video shows a very calm, laid back. He was dancing a jig. He hugged someone. It's the antithesis of what they built this up to be. And that is going to be something that the jury is going to hold on to, because you cannot overpromise and undeliver. And that's what this did.
Well, and also they're going to try to make it look like he was sort of on the verge of death anyway. He sure didn't look like it. It's good. He's dancing around. He's responding to people. He looked happy, looked jolly. He looked friendly. It's going to be a hard time to convince people he was some sort of a monster that was zonked out on drugs. It doesn't look like it, at least from what people who interacted with him said. Let's play one more piece. This is actually kind of chilling. This is an interaction
pause it right there.
Derek Chauvin, who has been a police officer.
Pause it right there, Shakira. Okay, because it ends after a few seconds in that clip. Okay, so check out that clip. That's from the readout, Joanne Reed, MSNBC. Jury shown body cam footage in day 3 of Chauvin trial. That's March 31st, 2021. All right, I want to switch gears. We'll have more coverage of the Derek Chauvin trial tomorrow. I want to go to this next story here. Now, we've been talking about what's going on in Georgia and the voter restriction laws in Georgia, as well as other states across the country. At least 253 bills in 43 states across the country. This is in retaliation for the results of the 2020 presidential election. Donald Trump losing the White House, Republicans losing the Senate, and still losing the House of Representatives. So we've been talking about Black Voters Matter and putting pressure on corporations, to Georgia-based corporations, to speak out in opposition against what's going on in Georgia and other states also. We know that civil rights groups have filed a lawsuit as well. Groups are fighting back. There have been 3 lawsuits filed. Yesterday, we talked about the 3rd lawsuit. BlackEnterprise.com has an article here that we discussed yesterday. Is coming up here. Georgia sued for 3rd time over voter restrictions bill. Delta, Coke, Coca-Cola face boycott over support. This is from March 30th, 2020. And civil rights groups intensified their legal fight against Georgia's new voter restrictions with a 3rd federal lawsuit, while Atlanta-based corporations Delta Airlines, Inc. and Coca-Cola continue to face boycott calls from activists who say they need to do more to oppose the law. The Republican-backed law, which Governor Brian Kemp, who stole an election from Stacey Abrams, strengthened identification requirements for absentee ballots, gave lawmakers the power to take over local elections, which is scary. It gave the state, like the state of Georgia, like the State Board of Elections, power to take over county board of elections and overturn election results that they don't like. Sharply limited the use of ballot drop boxes, shortened early voting periods for runoffs, made it a misdemeanor for members of the public to offer food and water to voters waiting in line. That's just a few of the things that it did, okay? So we talked about this on yesterday's show. Now, you have African-American CEOs. New York Times has a big article about this. You have African-American CEOs that have banded together, led by Ken Chenault. Ken Chenault is the former CEO of American Express. I don't know how many people knew that the CEO of American Express for years was an African-American man. And then also, he's on the left. And then also Kenneth Frazier, who is the current CEO of Merck Pharmaceuticals. Black executives call on corporations to fight restrictive voting laws. Black executives call on corporations to fight restrictive voting laws. Dozens responded after companies in Georgia said little against state legislation that put strict rules in place. So if we look at this article here written by Andrew Ross Sorkin and David Gales for the New York Times, dozens of the most prominent Black business leaders in America are banding together to call on companies to fight a wave of restrictive voting bills advanced by Republicans in at least 43 states. The campaign appears to be the first that so many powerful Black executives have organized to directly call out their peers for failing to stand up for racial justice. The effort led by Ken Chenault. Now, I knew about Ken Chenault back in business school, back in the 90s. And I read about Ken Chenault numerous times over the years in Black Enterprise magazine. Okay. This is leveraging your position in corporate America to push a political agenda to benefit African Americans. Okay. This is what has to happen. The effort led by Ken Chenault, a former chief executive of American Express, and Kenneth Frazier, the chief executive of Merck Pharmaceuticals, is a response to the swift passage of a Georgia law, Senate Bill 202, that they contend makes it harder for African Americans to vote. As the debate about the bill raged in recent weeks, most major corporations, including those with headquarters in Atlanta, did not take a position on the legislation. Ken Chenault, former CEO of American Express, said there is no middle ground here. He must be listening to my show, because that's what I said yesterday. This is what I've been saying. Look, there's no middle ground. There is no good people on both sides. You either for us or against us. That's all there is to it. Quote, there is no middle ground here. You either are for more people voting or you want to suppress the vote. Okay? It is what it is. There is no good people on both sides. There is no, well, we see their perspective also. Because when they filed those 61 lawsuits trying to overturn election results, in those lawsuits, they didn't claim widespread voter fraud because they didn't have any evidence to prove it. The executives did not criticize specific companies, but instead called on all of corporate America to publicly and directly oppose new laws that would restrict the rights of Black voters and to use their clout, money, and lobbyists to sway the debate with lawmakers. This is what you have to do. We leverage our positions. We leverage our positions in corporate America to push a political agenda, okay, to benefit all of African Americans and to use their clout, money, and lobbyists to sway the debate with lawmakers. Now, where are African American celebrities on this? That's what I want to know. Where are African American celebrities on this? Because I haven't heard from many of them. Maybe you have. Let me know. I haven't heard from many of them. African American celebrities in Georgia. You know, I know Tyler Perry does a lot, so I'm not picking on Tyler Perry, but there's a lot of African American celebrities in Georgia. They've been pretty quiet. I've been following this. I haven't heard much from any of them. Quote, this impacts all Americans, but we also need to acknowledge the history of voting rights for African Americans. Ken Chenault, former CEO of American Express, said. And as African American executives in corporate America, we were saying is we want corporate America to understand that, and we want them to work with us. Now, the letter was signed by 72 Black executives. They include Roger Ferguson Jr., the chief executive of TIAA, Melody Hobson and John Rogers, the co-chief executives of Ariel Investments. Now, Melody Hobson is a legend in her own right. I've known about Melody Hobson for years. If you used to listen to the Tom Joyner Morning Show, Melody Hobson was on every Monday morning talking about finances and money, things like that. Melody Hobson is with Ariel Investments. She's co CEO of Ariel Investments. But Melody Hobson is also married to a very famous man. He doesn't define her. She was already like black girl magic. But Melody Hobson is married to George Lucas. George Lucas created Star Wars. Melody Hobson is married to George Lucas. George Lucas financed Red Tails, the movie Red Tails about the Tuskegee Airmen, and helped produce that. George Lucas financed and he spent like about $90 million paying for the marketing and all that stuff for Red Tails. Well, he's married to Melody Hobson. You know, at least she married a billionaire. That's all I can say. I mean, hey, at least she married a billionaire. So, you know, I shouldn't say this, but you know, if nah, I'm not gonna say that. Okay, I ain't gonna say it. Somebody, but anyway, let me just put it like this: based upon statistics, women have a longer life expectancy than men. Let me just put it like that. I'm just saying in general. Okay, so hey, you know, at least she made a billionaire. So hey, so anyway, let's get back to our regularly scheduled programming. But anyway, so the letter was signed by 72 black executives. They include Roger Ferguson Jr., the chief executive of TIAA, Melody Hobson and John Rogers Jr., the co-chief executives of Ariel Investments. Robert F. Smith, the co-chief executive of Vista Equity Partners. Robert F. Smith is the richest African-American man in the country. It's not Kanye West. Go read the full article. They're talking about like projected earnings for Kanye West. Robert F. Smith, okay, Robert F. Smith adopted a class of Morehouse and paid off their student loan debt. That's Robert F. Smith. He's leveraging his billions, okay, and his clout to push this agenda. Also, Raymond McGuire, a former Citigroup executive who was running for mayor of New York. Now, in the days before Georgia law was passed, now I'm not sure if, now I ain't trying to pick on Tyler Perry, but Tyler Perry is I think he's a billionaire, and Michael Jordan is a billionaire too. Perry is not in corporate America. He owns his own company. He's not in corporate America. Michael Jordan, I'm not sure, but you know, they could add their names to this if they want to. Maybe they'll have a separate list of celebrities. Okay, so we'll see. Maybe they'll have a separate list of celebrities. All right. Now, in the days before the Georgia law passed, almost no major companies spoke out against the legislation, which introduced stricter voter identification requirements for absentee balloting, limited drop boxes, and expanded the legislature's power over elections. Big corporations based in Atlanta, including Delta Airlines, Coca-Cola, and Home Depot, general statements of support for voting rights, but none took a specific stance on the bills. And we've shared many of those statements here. Now, CNBC has an article from the day, and there's a lot of developments. Some of this we're going to get to tomorrow. We just don't have enough time today. But you have CNBC reporting major U.S. companies take aim at Georgia's new voter restrictions. Okay, so what's happening is more and more talk about economic boycotts were going and more pressure is being put on these corporations. and they start realizing, okay, we can't play both sides of the fence. We're gonna have to pick a side. We're gonna have to come out and support. And they were called out. There were articles that we shared here. There were articles from New York Times and Washington Post saying, well, wait a second. You know, we talked about the article here that dealt with in 2020, the corporations spoke out. They were very vocal about racial justice. But then when it came, but then when it comes to voting rights and these blatant Jim Crow 2021 Jim Crow era laws, they're silent. Okay, this article here from New York Times really put pressure on them and called them out. This is from March 29th, 2021. David Gales also, New York Times. Corporations vocal about racial justice go quiet on voting rights. They are complicit in their silence, one activist said, as bills that would disproportionately affect Black citizens across the country stir public debate. But then if we look at, we see the reporting from CNBC today, CNBC, the business channel, NBC's business channel. We see that, let me close this stuff out. Major U.S. companies take aim at Georgia's new voting restrictions. Okay, major U.S. companies taking aim at Georgia's new voting restrictions. So now a lot of these companies are putting out new statements, changing the tune, because we put an economic chokehold on them. This is from Wednesday, March 31st. Okay, those watching on Facebook, our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. Keep watching. We're going to keep broadcasting for a few more minutes. We're out of time here on 910 a.m. Superstation WFDF. Remember, right now, it's correct. Wrong behavior is not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you tomorrow night. Peace. Stand by. Stand by. Okay. All right, let me clear this line. All right, let's keep going for a few more minutes here. We're going to go back to the article from New York Times by the 72 Black executives. I just want to show you this quickly here. This is what pressure does. This is what pressure day after day does. Okay, this is what organizing does. Major U.S. companies take aim at Georgia's new voting restrictions. March 31st, 2021. Business executives across the United States are calling out efforts to restrict voting access. It comes after Georgia Governor Brian Kemp signed a bill into law that opponents say would disproportionately disenfranchise voters of color. CNBC compiled a list of corporate responses to the bill. Okay. And then they interviewed the right to vote is fundamental. They interviewed Kenneth Frazier. You know, we're going to play some of this interview here also. Okay. Business executives across the United States are calling out efforts to restrict voting access after Governor Brian Kemp signed a law that opponents say would disproportionately disenfranchise people of color. Among the overhaul, okay, we skip over that's redundant, talking about some of the things the bill does. The bill is one of many Republican-backed election efforts introduced across the U.S. after former President Donald Trump and other GOP members falsely claimed that last year's election defeat was due to fraud. No, your ass lost. Okay, that's what happened. You lost. It wasn't fraud. You just lost. Supporters say the law was needed to restore confidence in Georgia's elections. Okay, but you lied. You spread the lie about the big lie, about the stolen election. Then you pass these bills to address a lie. For Georgia, it comes after historic turnout in the state's election, particularly among Black voters and voters of color in the November general election and January runoff that saw Democrats defeat incumbent Republican senators. Civil rights groups, corporate leaders, and Democratic officials are denouncing the law. CNBC compiled a list of corporate responses to the bill. Okay, so you have BlackRock. Read through some of these. I think this is the new statement from Coca-Cola executive Alfredo Rivera. As soon as Georgia's legislature convened this year, our company joined with other Georgia businesses to share our core principles. We opposed measures that would seek to diminish or restrict voter access, and we advocated for broad access, voter convenience, election integrity, and political neutrality. Anything that inhibits these principles can lead to voter suppression. We took these steps because they align to our purpose and the conscience we follow. Now, Georgia-based Delta Airlines said in a memo to employees that the final bill is unacceptable. So this is the new statement from CEO Ed Bastian, who got blasted on social media, blasted on cable news for the statement he put out. We shared his statement yesterday that it appeared to agree with Senate Bill 202. The new statement from CEO Ed Bastian, and also Latasha Brown and her group, Black Voters Matter, they were outside of Delta Airlines in Atlanta at Hartsfield Jackson Airport. They were outside protesting, drawing attention to Delta Airlines. After all that, now CEO Ed Bastian puts out a new statement. Here's what the new statement says. Let me blow this up. I want you all to see this. Here's what the new statement says. Okay. Georgia-based Delta Airlines said in a memo to employees that the, quote, final bill is unacceptable and does not match Delta's values. Quote, after having time, this is what, this is so funny, right? After having time to now fully understand all that is in the bill, coupled with discussions with leaders and employees in the Black community, it's evident that the bill includes provisions that will make it harder for many underrepresented voters, particularly Black voters, to exercise their constitutional right to elect their representatives. That is wrong. People lit his ass up. That's what happened. Black people in Atlanta and across the country lit his ass up. That's what you have to do. That's what you have to do. This is war. We can't be playing games. Pharmaceutical giant Merck said that the company now, Kenneth Frazier, African American, we showed Kenneth Frazier. He's talked about in the article from New York Times. We can go back to that in just a second. Kenneth Frazier is the CEO of Merck Pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceutical giant Merck said Wednesday that the company stands, quote, strong on our core values, including our commitment to social justice and the right of people to fully and freely participate in electoral processes. Quote, there is no more fundamental right than the right to vote. Democracy rests on ensuring that every eligible voter has an equal and fair opportunity to cast a ballot, free from restrictions that have a discriminatory impact. We all have an obligation to stand up against racism and other forms of discrimination whenever we see them, the company added. Now, see, Kenneth Frazier is the CEO of Merck, okay? So they have statements from Porsche, UPS. Now, UPS is based in Georgia. UPS said this week that the company supports the ability and facilitation of all eligible voters to exercise their right to vote. Like other businesses in the community, we actively engage with political leaders in both parties and other stakeholders to advocate for more equitable access to the polls and for integrity in the election process across the state. We echo the statement by the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce and stand ready to continue to help in ensuring every Georgia voter has the ability to vote. So that we shared that statement before from UPS. That's a lukewarm statement from UPS. Okay, I think they're going to change that statement at the more pressure put on. So read the rest of these. Yeah, Bank of America, Microsoft, all this. Okay, read this article here from CNBC. Major U.S. companies take aim at Georgia's new voting restrictions. We'll come back to this in just a second here. I want to go back to the article from the New York Times. Okay, because this is a huge development. And this article came out today. Black executives call on corporations to fight restrictive voting laws. Black executives call on corporations to fight restrictive voting laws. So, big corporations based in Atlanta, including Delta Airlines, Coca-Cola, and Home Depot, offered general statements of support for voting rights, but none took a specific stance on the bills. The same was true for most of the executives who signed a new letter, including Ken Frazier of Merck Pharmaceuticals and Ken Chenault, former CEO of American Express. Ken Frazier said he had paid only peripheral attention to the matter before the Georgia law was passed on Thursday. Quote, when the law passed, I started paying attention, he said. When Ken Frazier realized what was in the law and that similar bills were being advanced in other states, he and Ken Chenault decided to take action. On Sunday, they began emailing and texting with a group of Black executives discussing what more corporations could do. Quote, there seems to be no one speaking out, Ken Frazier said. We thought if we spoke up, it might lead to a situation where others felt the responsibility to speak up. Okay. Now, among other executives who signed the letter, Ursula Burns, a former CEO of Xerox. Ursula Burns, you know, she at one point, Ursula Burns was the only CEO of a Fortune 500 company, the only African-American CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Ken Frazier, she was the only female. Okay. I think she was the only female. Richard Parsons, former chair of Citigroup and chief executive at Time Warner. I remember when Richard Parsons was at Time Warner. I remember when Ursula Burns was at Xerox. I used to read about them in Black Enterprise magazine. And Tony West, the chief legal officer at Uber. Okay. Tony West, the chief legal officer at Uber. The group of leaders with support from the Black Economic Alliance bought a full-page ad in the Wednesday print edition of the New York Times. See, that's how you do it. You buy these full-page ads in these newspapers like the New York Times, things like this. That gets attention. That you are leveraging your position to push a political agenda. Now, the executives are hoping that big companies will prevent dozens of similar bills in other states from becoming law. But see, they can put pressure. These corporations can put pressure, especially the ones based in Georgia. They can put pressure on the Georgia state legislature because they financed, they made donations to a lot of the Republicans in the Georgia state legislature. They can put pressure on them to reverse that bill. That's what happened in Indiana with the Indiana transgender bathroom bill back in 2015. Corporations spoke out after that bill passed. Within 1 week, the state legislature passed a new bill and changed the law. And then Mike Pence had to come back out because Mike Pence was the governor of Indiana at the time. Mike Pence had to come back out, do another press conference. He was standing there looking nervous. Sweat was on his upper lip. You can go watch the video of the press conference he did. Okay. They got so much pressure from corporate America, the state legislature had to change the bill. Okay, so the Georgia legislature, so the executives are hoping that big companies will prevent dozens of similar bills in other states from becoming law. Ken Frazier, CEO of Merck Pharmaceuticals, said the Georgia legislature was the first one. If corporate America does not stand up, we'll get these laws passed in many places in the country. The laws, you have 43 state legislatures, Republicans in 43 states trying to push through these voter restriction bills. In 2017, we talked about this on our show when Donald Trump attacked Ken Frazier. In 2017, Kenneth Frazier was the first chief executive to publicly resign from Donald Trump's business advisory councils after Donald Trump's equivocating response to white nationalist violence in Charlottesville, Virginia. His resignation led to other chief executives to distance themselves from Donald Trump, and the advisory groups disbanded. Ken Frazier said, as African-American business executives, we don't have the luxury of being bystanders to injustice. We don't have the luxury of being bystanders to injustice. We don't have the luxury of sitting on the sidelines when these kinds of injustices are happening all around us. Now, companies have taken stands on state legislation in recent years, often to powerful effect. See, this is what I'm talking about here. Often to powerful effect. In 2016 and 2017, as conservatives advanced so-called bathroom bills in states including Indiana, North Carolina, Georgia, and Texas, big companies went so far as to threaten to take their business elsewhere if the laws were enacted. Those bills were never signed into law. This is why I said, if you speak up for LGBT, then you need to speak up for BLACK. On yesterday, if you speak up, if you come out and support LGBT, you speak up for LGBT when they have transgender bathroom bills, then you need to speak up for BLACK when you got voter restriction bills like this. On I think it was Sunday's show, I was reading a statement from UPS, and you know UPS has a commercial. What can Brown do for you? I said Brown can stand up for black. That's what Brown can do for us. Brown can stand up for black. So read the rest of this. Read the rest of this article here. This is from New York Times. Black executives call on corporations to fight restrictive voting laws. Dozens responded after companies in Georgia said little against state legislation that put strict rules in place. Okay, so that's good news right there. This is what pressure can do. This is what pressure can do. So after we defeat these bills, then what we have to do is renegotiate our relationship with corporate America. Because this is something that Dr. Claude Anderson's been talking about. Dr. Claude Anderson is one of my teachers. We talk up, periodically. I've interviewed him a number of times, and he's been saying for years that we have to. And back in 2018, when I interviewed him, and it's on Facebook and YouTube, we were talking about DACA and immigration and things like this. And he said we have to leverage our economics to enforce our politics. This is an example of it. We have to leverage our economics to enforce our political agenda, put pressures on corporations like this. But the next thing we have to do, once we defeat these bills, is renegotiate our relationship with corporate America and make sure we get a bigger percentage of corporate contracts, advertising contracts, money deposited in black-owned banks from corporate America, things like that. All that goes to African-American-owned businesses and helps to create more jobs, helps to increase revenue for African-American businesses, et cetera. We have to renegotiate our relationship with corporate America as well, because they have billions of dollars worth of contracts, everything from catering contracts to limousines to security to janitorial services, all different types of things like this. They give out billions of dollars a year in contracts to companies. Advertising contracts for advertising agencies is huge. Okay, so we spend, GDP $1.3 trillion a year. We're spending hundreds of billions of dollars a year collectively with various corporations. They're largely taking that money and contracting with white-owned businesses, white-owned corporations, white-owned companies. We have to get a better return on our investment with corporations. So we have to renegotiate our relationship with corporate America as well. Okay, that's the other part of it. Okay, let's continue. So those just tuning in, we talked about George Floyd in the beginning of the show and day 3 of the trial, Derek Chauvin trial. So each day we're covering the trial. We'll continue tomorrow. And we're talking about this second story here. 72 black executives call on corporations to fight restrictive voting laws. All right, so be sure to follow us here on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. I'm gonna go to this clip here from CNBC that talks about the 72 black executives coming out against the restrictive voting bills. Be sure to register for the online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. This is a 8-week, it's actually going to be 9 weeks. We're going to add an additional class. It's an 8-week, 16-hour online course that I teach. We deal with thousands of years of history, and we deal with what led up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. I teach the class on Tuesdays, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tuesdays, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And all the sessions are live. We do the class live. All the sessions are recorded, so you can go back and watch it over and over again. Watch from around the world. It's all the sessions are on demand as well. After we do them live, you can ask questions during class. We have a live text chat. But we deal with what led up. We do 1,000 years of history and what led up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. So if you go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, you scroll down, you see information about our show. We're here Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to 12 midnight Eastern Standard Time, Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. You can click here to listen to audio podcasts of our shows. We have over 1,000 episodes there. I'm uploading more shows this week. You can read articles that I've written here. This one is an episode of our show. I forgot which day we did this. It was a Monday. It was the day after the Grammys. And there were Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion performing WAP at the Grammys, and looked like they were about to start scissoring each other. They were humping on each other. But I dealt with it broadly negative corporate controlled hip hop. It wasn't just talking about Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion, dealing with negative corporate controlled hip hop and how we are under attack, how African Americans are under attack. So we have information for the show here, for the class here. Click on register here. Takes you to the next page, and just click on enroll. So the class is regularly $130. It's on sale $80. As soon as you register, you can start watching the content. You can watch the class we just did, last week's class. All right. And we also deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors. And what the Moors take into Europe, they take the teachings from ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt into Europe. And this is going to bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. And unfortunately, all that came back to kick us in the behind. That's why I say I wish we never taught them. All of that we taught Europeans came back to kick us in the behind, including taking sugar and cotton into Europe, including taking something called a fire stick into Europe, which is a long stick that fire one projectile. And then in Europe, they're going to create the first firearm, produce the first firearm in about 1364 AD, something like that, mid 1400s. And it's going to be downhill from there. Okay, so I want to go to this clip here from CNBC. This is an interview with Ken Frazier. They're talking about the letter that was signed. Hold on just a second here. Okay, just a second here. I'm queuing it up.
This morning by the leaders of this effort, Ken Frazier, Chairman and CEO of Merck, and Ken Chenault, Chairman and Managing Director of General Catalyst. He's, of course, the former Chairman and CEO of American Express. And we are privileged to have both of you on the program this morning with this historic open letter to your peers in corporate America to take action. Let me start with you, Ken Chenault, and I guess I'm going to have to call one Chenault and one Frazier in this case. Tell us how this came to be, because this does appear to be the first time a group of leaders of your prominence have come together on an issue like this in such a forceful way.
So, Andrew, this is the first time. And I think what's very important is to understand the history of voting rights in America. We all know the right to vote is fundamental. But for African Americans, they had to earn the right to vote. They had to demonstrate. And anyone who has followed American history understands that the vote is absolutely crucial. Just think if we had the right to vote, blacks had the right to vote after the Civil War, where this country would have been. Just think after the Brown v. Board of Education case. If corporations had stood up and said, we support the integration of schools. And so what I think is very important here is that we are asking corporations, and this is a call for action. What we have heard from corporations is general statements about their support for voting rights and against voter suppression. But now we're asking, put those words into action. And we're asking corporate America to publicly and directly oppose any discriminatory legislation and all measures designed to limit America's ability to vote. Americans must vote. Black Americans must vote. And when it comes to protecting the rights of all Americans to vote, there can be no middle ground. We cannot be in the business of creating unjust and undemocratic laws in an attempt to thwart the will of the people. And so what we're saying is this is fundamentally un-American. And corporations have to stand up. There is no middle ground. And so we put together a group starting Sunday afternoon. And this has been a source of conversation over the last 10 days in the Black community and clearly from Blacks in corporate America. So I want to emphasize this is about all Americans having the right to vote, but we need to recognize the special history of the denial of right to vote for Black Americans, and we will not be silent.
Ken Frazier, when you look at corporate America today and you look at the statements that have been made since the murder of George Floyd, and I'll never forget you coming on our broadcast literally several mornings right after that tragic day, there has been a silence to some extent. As Ken Chenault just said, there have been general statements made about it. But when it comes to this issue of voter suppression, you have not seen the big companies come out publicly as aggressively as you are calling on them to do, especially in states like Georgia, Coca-Cola, Delta, Home Depot. What have your conversations been with your peers, not just in this group, but across the country around this topic?
Well, thank you for having me, Andrew. I've had some conversations. I think people are trying to get their heads around it. And I think it's important at the outset for people to understand what's wrong with this law, because it's a very long, complicated law. But if you'll just give me a minute, I want to explain to your viewers why we feel so strongly about this law, and particularly how this law could be the prototype for a lot of bad laws. So let me start by talking about some facts about Georgia. Over the past few years, the number of registered voters in Georgia has gone up by 2 million. Roughly half of the registered voters in Georgia live in the 9-county metropolitan Atlanta area. We know in the past elections that the wait lines have been hours, up to 5 hours in that area. That area, of course, is much more densely populated. It tends to lean Democratic, and it happens to be more non-white than other areas. In fact, people who vote in counties that are largely white spend, on average, something like 6 minutes in line if they come out to work. If you're in a county that's largely non-white, you spend 51 minutes. On average, Black voters stand in line about 9 times longer than white voters before we make these changes. So now, within 2 months of a runoff, a close runoff election in Georgia, we make a number of changes that are actually intended to make it more difficult for people to vote in a convenient reliable, and secure manner. So let me just tell you about a few of them. In Georgia, they had secure drop boxes. Okay? In Fulton County, the most populous area of Atlanta, this law reduces the number of secure drop boxes from 40 in the county to 8, an 80% reduction. And those drop boxes are not accessible all through all time and in terms of hours and days of the week. They're going to be put inside voting places. And so you have to go inside during voting hours. Now, obviously, people thought secure drop boxes were a good idea, or they wouldn't have made them available in the first place. So what we're now doing is we're restricting access to those secure drop boxes. In Fulton County, again, there were mobile polls for people who had to work. Remember, we're saying that those people who have to work every day, bus drivers, grocery clerks, a few months ago, we were saying they were our American heroes. Those are the people who don't get to take off from work. So they were mobile polls. We're going to restrict the mobile polls. We're going to reduce by more than half the period for people to request an absentee ballot. We're actually going to drastically reduce the period for early voting. And frankly, we're going to make it almost impossible to do it in the context of a runoff after another election. Importantly, with respect to provisional ballots, if someone moves and votes in another precinct, it used to be that people would then go back to the original precinct. And if you hadn't voted there, in other words, if you hadn't voted twice, your vote would actually count. So what we're doing is in a situation where Black and non-white voters are already being denied the same access because they have to stand in much longer lines, we're actually making it much harder for people to actually cast their votes. And then on top of the fact that people are standing in line for ungodly hours, we now make it illegal to give those people water when they're standing in line. Because of course, we know from experience that only fraudulent voters get thirsty when they're standing in line for a long period of time. So if you take collectively all of those changes, what you've done is you've made it harder for people who live in the most populous areas, largely non-white voters, to vote. And I'll just make this following comment. The other problem with this as a prototype is what was the process that was followed here? Were there legislative hearings? No. Were there fact-finding commissions? No. Was there opportunity for public comment? No. So there is no substantiated, compelling evidence of voter fraud to justify these restrictions. So what we do is we raise the specter of voter fraud, and now we restrict legal voters, eligible voters' ability to cast ballots. And that's what's wrong with this bill, because democracy depends on every voter in this country having free and fair access to vote without discrimination and without undue hindrance. And this set of changes in this long bill, and it's a complicated bill, and I believe people think that they can get away with it because most people won't read the bill, okay? But in totality, these changes will make it much harder for certain voters to vote.
Yeah, just one point, Andrew, that I would emphasize. What we're asking is, I frankly applaud what close to 60 companies did in signing a business statement opposing anti-LGBTQ state legislation, stating their clear opposition to this harmful legislation aimed at restricting the access of LGBTQ people in society. And what we're saying is, fundamentally, we want corporations to do the same thing here.
All right. So excellent interview. That's from the Squawk Box on CNBC. And that was Ken Chenault and Kenneth Frazier. And they're talking about, they organized 72 African-American executives. They're putting pressure on corporate America. They're leveraging their contacts. They're leveraging their corporate positions to push this agenda and fight back against Jim Crow 2021. in these bills in 43 state legislatures. So that's excellent. Check out the article once again from CNBC. Major U.S. companies, and we'll flip back over to it here. This article from CNBC, March 31st, 2021. Major U.S. companies take aim at Georgia's new voting restrictions. Okay. So this is a good article written by Jessica Brzezinski and Kevin Stankiewicz for CNBC. All right. We'll talk more about this on Thursday's show, and we'll deal with day 4 of the trial also. All right. If you you can support the African History Network if you like to stop your information through Cash App, $, the AHN Show through Cash App, or through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. We're here 6 days a week. This helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting 6 days a week, pay some of the bills, pay for some of these services that we use, like Restream, that I'm broadcasting through right now. If you donate through Cash App, be sure to type in $, the AHN Show, SHOW, and it'll come up and it'll say Michael, and it'll show my picture there. All right, $, the AHN Show. You can still register for the online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, where they didn't teach you in school. We deal with thousands of years of history and what led up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. We deal with ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet, some ancient African civilizations. Dr. David M. Hotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, documented evidence, spoke to our class. He came and presented to our class a few weeks ago. So when you register, you'll be able to watch that class and the one we just did on Tuesday. And next class is April 2nd. Next class is April 2nd. I'm sorry, April 4th. What is that? April 4th? Yeah. Next class is Tuesday, April 4th. All right. We have to get out of here. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you tomorrow night. Peace. Thanks for tuning in.